So, where are we going right now with this course? Well, we want to take you on a journey to rediscover the creative genius you were born with. Because as we talked about, the world has lied to you. Culture has lied to you and has tried to bury or steal the genius that God put inside of you and who He created you to be. And we want to empower you to take that back and live it out again. You know, my wife, who's been a part of this journey, we've taught this and empowered people in these concepts for years. And so even though she's in the thick of it like that, she even still came to me and said, you know, once we've lost that creative genius we were born with, like those 98% of adults, how do we, can we even get it back? And yeah, it's a great question. It's because if even she is asking that question and she's been around it through the processes of taking it back all these years, but the question is that real for us all? Can we get it back? And the answer is, as you can guess, a resounding yes. But probably the bigger question is how. And we're going to walk through that throughout the course, but I want to give you a little bit of a picture of that why and how right now as we get started. The first one is I want to start with a concept called the culture purple. We actually have a book about that. We'll show you more throughout the course. And as parts of the course are in that book, not the entire thing, but it could be a resource that you might want to grab and be able to have as you go on this journey or to help others on the journey or your own family later on. The culture purple, you have something to give. But the culture purple is named after a process. And because purple is a color that's usually reserved for royalty. And we associate purple with royalty and with esteem, with something high up, with great value. And there's a reason why that purple was adopted by royals so many years ago. And it's because only royalty could afford purple. Everyone else in society couldn't. And they all had to just go with more bland colors back then. And the reason why that only royalty could afford purple was because it was a very long and very expensive process to create the color purple. And so where purple began was up off the Mediterranean in what's now Lebanon, in the areas of like Sidon and Tyre or Tyre, however you pronounce it. But they found piles of sea snails, of just their shells. And because what would happen is they would gather these sea snails and then they would take this gland out of them and extract a substance from these sea snails. And then they would take that substance and they would put it in these basins. And then in the sun, they would go through this incredible transformation. And as the longer it waited in the sun and transformed, the color is what was changing. And then they would use that color to begin to dye the different fabrics. It was such a long process and such an expensive process that developed the color purple that, like I said, only royalty could afford it. But we like to look at that process of purple and think of it as a culture that we can live out. It's a culture of extraction because that purple, or what became purple, was hidden away in seemingly insignificant or buried or hidden places. And it had to be found, discovered, and extracted, and then put through a process to recover that royal color and those attributes that we ascribe so much value to today. And so that's the process of getting back our creative genius. It's actually embracing process of extracting what is inside of you and hidden or buried. But we live in a culture today that is so much about hot takes or urgency or clicks. And we get away from embracing process. But that's what this course is for, is to help you re-embrace the process, to walk you through it, that process of purple and how we can use it to extract what's already in you, because that creative genius isn't gone. We can take it back, and we're looking forward to helping you do so. One of the other illustrations that's among our favorites for what is still inside of us, why it's of value, and how much more can happen from it goes back to the California gold rush of the mid 1800s. And it's a very famous time in the world. California is one of the reasons it's on the map at the level it is because of that gold rush. There's professional football teams named after it with the 49ers in San Francisco. But the California gold rush, as you can see with those things, it literally changed a nation. And yet it was such a small area, like 4 miles by 120 miles wide, where the gold was found in this vein that goes up Central California. The population during that time, in just a 4-year span, grew from 14,000 people to over 200,000 people. Can you imagine your town or a small area or just a county, for instance, growing at that level? In that short of time, the kind of transformation that would take place. Because so much transformation happened there, it transformed the whole nation because of the shift out west. They actually recovered over 125 million ounces of gold. That's not $125 million worth, because each of those ounces today are now worth approximately $2,400 each. And so they found over 125 million of those ounces in that gold rush, in the mother lode, what they called it. But the part that is astounding to me, with all of that change that took place, with all of the value that they extracted from hidden places in the ground that had been waiting there the whole time, they only discovered 20%. 20% of what was hidden changed the world in that kind of way and brought that much more value. What if they found the other 80%? How much more value was waiting, still is waiting to be discovered? How much more change could that bring to those communities, to California, to our nation, and to the world if we learn to tap into and discover that other 80%? And that's how we think of it with people. What if all of us, and maybe that's why we've buried or lost that creative genius, what if we're only living off of 20% of who God created us to be? What if that other 80% is buried and hidden inside of us? Of all of that value, all of those gifts and talents, and all of the impact that you were created to have in the world, or on your family, or in your community, or the nation. How much more would this nation and the world change if you discover that other 80% that is in you and extracted that value up and then began to live from that value towards those you love and lead in the world all around you? That is the purpose, the why, and the how of this course. And we're looking forward to walking you through that process of extraction.